nature of the Great Seal is so mysterious that some believe that it came from a supernatural force. An account recorded by Dr. Robert Hieronymus in his book, Founding Fathers' Secret Societies, says that the Great Seal was given to Thomas Jefferson by a mysterious cloaked figure. The account reads that Jefferson told a strange story. A man approached him wearing a black cloak that practically covered him face and all, and told him that he, the strange visitor, knew they were trying to devise a seal, and that he had a design which was appropriate and meaningful.
Jefferson, of course, looked at it, according to this story, and said, "This is it. This is it." He knew it was it, and it was right. So he supposedly came running back into whatever, whether it was a tent or whatever it was, and he showed it to other individuals, and he told them about, he met this person outside. Of course, they went outside to go to find the guy, and he's gone. So supposedly we'll never find out who designed the Great Seal of the United States.
While Dr. Hieronymus admits that he is skeptical about such stories, there are others who claim to believe them to this day. Perhaps it has something to do with John Adams, who was on the first seal committee with Thomas Jefferson. According to the written account, John Adams was there when this bizarre event took place. Oddly enough, the Adams Memorial in Washington, D.C. is adorned with this mysterious cloaked figure. Perhaps it's just a coincidence.
The American $1 bill is full of magical symbolism. Many people know about the magical significance of the design of the Great Seal of the United States, yet they only know half the truth. We have been told that the seal of the United States is merely a coat of arms, or what is called a layman in magic. It is true that the Great Seal is a layman or coat of arms that represents uniting the original 13 colonies into one country, yet it is more than just a layman. The coat of arms is only half the story, albeit the only story you know. Let's look at the major magical symbolism found on the $1 bill. Looking at the obverse or front side of the $1 bill, our eyes land directly on the image of George Washington, and we are immediately reminded of his Masonic heritage. George is framed by the Greek letter omega. The omega on the $1 bill is a direct reference to God. Omega is the end of an old way of life for the start of a new, better way. On the square on the Treasury Department seal, there are 13 pentagram stars. The most frequently used symbolic reference found on the $1 bill is to the number 13. Through the Hebrew system of gematria, letters are broken down into numbers. The words love and unity both equate to the number 13. Found on the reverse or back side of the $1 bill is a wealth of highly significant magical symbolism used in Western Kabbalistic ceremonial magic. On the center of the bill is the only English phrase used on the reverse side. It reads, "In God we trust." "In God we trust" came from a hymn or invocation to the American people by Aleister Crowley. It is an invocation to manifest the new aeon or age and drive America and the world into independence. The real magic takes place on the Great Seal of the United States. On the obverse side of the Great Seal, there are
13 stars above the eagle's head, 13 stripes in the shield, 13 leaves on the olive branch, 13 arrows in the eagle's talon, and then 13 letters in the phrase E pluribus unum, which makes for 2 points on either side of the eagle's head, for the 6 points total of the hexagram.
Furthermore, the 13 pentagram stars are united into one hexagram star, symbolizing unity of man or woman with the universe, the unity of the macrocosm and the microcosm. As above, so below. As below, so above. A pentagram represents the microcosm, which is related to a human. A hexagram represents the universe. When a hexagram is superimposed over the pyramid, the letters A, S, M, O, and N are connected. Looking at the reverse of the seal, we are again bombarded with 13. There are 13 letters in the phrase Annuit Coeptis, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 steps in the pyramid. The truncated pyramid with the capstone floating above is also a symbolic merging of the microcosm and the macrocosm. The base of the pyramid represents the microcosm, or human, and the eye in the capstone represents the macrocosm, or universe. The same eye is found on statues of Buddha as his third eye. This is the eye of Horus, the all-seeing celestial eye. The pyramid is a representation of a person sitting in meditation. The capstone or keystone represents the brain. A capstone united with the truncated pyramid to make a complete pyramid represents uniting with one's pineal gland.
And of course, many of the people who are into the New Age are into astral projection and in contact with these spirit beings, and there really are spirit beings out there. They refer to them as the Masters of Wisdom, or the Great White Brotherhood, or the Enlightened Ones, and they believe that they are guiding society. These are actually demonic forces and demonic beings, and of course they can materialize and disappear. The average individual says, oh, that can't be true, and yet it is true. And when you talk to the people who are dealing with this, they come in contact with this many times. They have accessed this other dimension, which is truly a demonic dimension.
Opening your third eye is what this book is all about. When we fold $1 bills from right to left and then top to bottom as the prophecy instructs, we obtain knowledge of the rest of the symbolism and intention of the Great Seal. When 2 quarters are placed beside one another, we see the eagle slammed into the pyramid. The eagle represents an airplane. The pyramid represents a tower. This image on the folded $1 bills holds the same symbolism as the Tower Tarot card. Tarot cards are not only used in fortune-telling, they also each hold specific qualities and can be charged according to those qualities. The tarot is a pictorial representation of forces of nature as conceived by the ancients according to a conventional symbolism. The Tower Tarot card not only reflects the tragedy of 9/11 through its imagery. The force shown on the card by lightning and fire is the same force represented by the eagle on the $1 bill. The passive force shown by the building is the same passive force shown by the pyramid. The force in the Tower Tarot card is an emotional water energy that was put into action to produce a change in humanity. When 2 quarters are placed side by side so the opposite is showing from what was shown earlier, an eagle's head and an inverted triangle are seen. An eagle, more specifically an eagle's head, represents the active element of water in Western Kabbalistic magic. An inverted triangle represents the passive element of water. Why is an eagle a water symbol? The eagle relates to the zodiac sign of Scorpio, which is a water sign. Christian tradition has linked the 4 evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, with 4 symbols: man, lion, bull, and an eagle. The 4 symbols were taken from Ezekiel's dream, where he saw 4 creatures with 4 faces. The first living creature was like a lion, the second was like an ox, the third had a face like a man, and the fourth was like a flying eagle. The 4 creatures from the vision can be seen on tarot card number 21, the World or Universe card. In astrology, the 12 signs of the zodiac are divided into 4 elemental groups of 3, one for each element of fire, water, air, and earth. The eagle also represents a phoenix, which is shown on some of the earlier Great Seals. The phoenix is reborn from its own ashes and represents rebirth and spiritual freedom. The cloud above the eagle is also related to a dream vision like Ezekiel's. The cloud is a reference to David's dream in the Bible of building a temple dedicated to God, and the vision that George Washington had where he was contacted by angels regarding the building of a united country for God. Here is a comparison of the Great Seal and Talisman of the United States with a water talisman made by a Golden Dawn magician. This talisman was made to increase personal pleasure or positive emotions. An image of the Ace of Cups tarot card was used along with the eagle's head and inverted triangle to provide the necessary symbolism. The Ace of Cups, shown by the overflowing cup, is a minor tarot card that represents emotional change in the microcosm or individual. It would be a perfect card to combine with water symbolism to create a personal change. On the other hand, if one wanted to create an emotional change in the macrocosm, using the Tower Tarot card would be perfect because it is a major card and reflects the universe. Here are some talismans that attract planetary powers. We can see the similarity between their 2 circles or seals connected by a strip and the 2 seals connected by the word 1 on the dollar. On the $1 bill, the connecting strip is the word 1. King Solomon's talisman's seals are great examples of how specific images were combined with specific holy phrases to attract specific forces. Sometimes Solomon used Hebrew phrases and divine names, and sometimes he used Latin. The USA used Latin prayers on the Great Seal to call forth higher powers, just as King Solomon did. E pluribus unum was taken from the biographical writings of the Christian poet St. Augustine. The phrase relates to setting our souls ablaze and out of many making one. Annuit coeptis is part of a Latin invocation to the Roman god Jupiter written by the poet Virgil. The original poem and prayer was an invocation to Jupiter requesting aid in the daring enterprise ahead. Novos Ordo Seclorum was also taken from a poem by Virgil and is often translated as New Order of the Ages. It is suggested that the poem was interpreted as a prophecy of the second coming of Christ to judge the world.
The 3 phrases on the $1 bill are not just words with the mere material worldly meaning.
They are all parts of invocations to bring unseen powers to use on earth, to aid in their new enterprise of making souls ablaze in people throughout the world and to unite everyone in harmony. Does the style look a little more historically familiar now? Here is another Golden Dawn talisman, this time attracting the planetary powers of Saturn. The similarities between the talismans and the Great Seal are easy to see. Both the talismans and the Great Seal have one side with phrases above and below the image, while the other side has a phrase in the image. The Great Seal is designed like the Saturn talismans, with an image on one side that has verse above and below, and the other side with verse in the image. There is one more thing hidden in the dark. Okay, maybe three. There are 3 geometric owls hidden in the $1 bill. The owl is a figure and animal sacred to the Egyptian god Horus. He is the god of the New Age, the 3rd Aeon. The 3 owls are devoted to Horus and the 3 Aeons. Let's recap. The $1 bill is a coat of arms, or layman, and a talisman. It holds the energies of the number 13, love and unity. It uses the magical symbols of the water eagle and a truncated pyramid with capstone floating above. Folded, it holds the imagery of the Tower Tarot card, which utilizes the energies used on the seal. On the other folded side, it blatantly shows the 2 forces uniting in their most basic symbolism. There are Latin prayers, or invocation to gods or higher powers, which would have been used in a magical ceremony to call upon the forces necessary to charge the talisman. The $1 bill holds the same characteristics as a talisman. The $1 bill is a talisman. It is a sign, a push from the hand above. Israel Regarde, a Golden Dawn magician from the 20th century, says that when constructing a talisman to increase pleasure through emotions, one would use divine words and phrases together with the traditional symbols of water and the inverted triangle. We would also include the carob of water, the eagle's head, representing the sublimation of the intrinsic energy of Scorpio as the active power of God operating through the element water. What is a talisman? A talisman is a magical figure charged with the force which it is intended to represent. A talisman is a storehouse of some particular kind of energy, the kind that is needed to accomplish the task for which you have constructed it. Talismans are used in ceremonial magic to store a force and energy that is brought about during the ceremony. After the ceremony is over and the forces are dispersed, the talisman remains charged with the energy that was called for. The Great Seal and Talisman of the United States was constructed as a storehouse for the energy of everyone that came into contact with it. Our energy has been, is being, and will continue to be charged into the emotional water change implied by the symbols on the $1 bill. 911 brought on a new paradigm.
As with all secret societies, you have levels, and if you're on the lower levels, you don't even know they're upper levels. They don't even tell you. You bump into it by accident, or someone comes along. Now, in Scottish Rite, that's something different, because they know that there's a... But before then, and basically secret societies, let's go to ancient Egypt. To the ancient Egyptians, the priest would tell the serfs, the guys that tilled the land, they would say, the sun is God, okay? And so they accepted that very low-level interpretation, all physical. That's not what the priest believed. What the priest believed, there was a second level. The priest believed that, no, the physical sun is not the supreme being. It's the spirit which flows through the physical sun. that is the supreme deity. However, there was another level, and the priests didn't even know it. It was those that were involved and elevated to now, if I would have told you this 15 years ago, I might have gotten shot.
cocktail party, and he felt very out of place, and apparently he was in a tuxedo way in the corner. And the psychic came over to him and said, whatever you're working on is going to make you a ton of money. And that was just before he did the X-Files. Well, that psychic I talked to, I go, what were you doing at the holiday party? She goes, I was hired by the CIA to go to parties and then just go home and email what I talked about to people. So the CIA has been tracking Hollywood parties since the 80s in order to determine, because, you know, Hollywood films are a...
They set the agenda.
They set a foreign policy, sort of. I mean,
no, it's a projection. It's America's dominance. They admit it's a lot of it's Hollywood.
Right. And so they want to make sure that all the producers and the writers, that nobody's thinking anything so radical or doing a movie that will completely undermine their foreign policy plans.
Astrology, ancient mystical star science, or man-made mumbo-jumbo. Love it or loathe it, astrology has been around for thousands of years. Here's an Egyptian depiction of the night sky. The Egyptians believed that the constellations were the representation of their pantheistic gods and goddesses. Astrologers focus on the area of the night sky known as the ecliptic, as seen here. The ecliptic is the apparent path of the sun as seen from the earth. Divided into the 12 major constellations that make up the ecliptic, astrologers follow the celestial bodies as they travel through it. From the ecliptic is derived the zodiac that we know today. The Egyptians believed that the heavens were imbued with the magical and mystical properties of their gods and goddesses, and they believed that they could channel their energies by reflecting the constellations in their architecture on the ground below. An example is the layout of the pyramids at Giza, which the Egyptians built to reflect the celestial grouping known as Orion's belt. It's an ancient hermetic principle called as above, so below. Astrology today has been largely relegated to the ranks of superstition, with many people glancing at their horoscopes for fun. But tabloid astrology merely focuses on the position of the sun through the ecliptic. In-depth astrology considers the influence of all the solar system's celestial bodies, following the positions of the sun, Saturn, and even Pluto. As the celestial bodies travel through the ecliptic, the apparent path they trace as seen from the Earth, astrologers believe they form influential aspects to each other. This in-depth astrology is used in occult circles, such as secret societies, like the Order of the Golden Dawn, with its complex occult symbolism. The Freemasons, whose members have included America's first president, George Washington, use astrology in their symbolic art. Here we see a Freemasonic tracing board whose royal arch can be seen adorned with the signs of the zodiac. On the Freemasonic apron, the all-seeing eye of Horus, an Egyptian symbol. At the George Washington Masonic Monument, we see a giant compass and square depicted. The Freemasonic symbol of their great work is seen here, also adorned with another Egyptian all-seeing eye. But what of the compass and square and its Illuminati symbolism? What can it mean?
In the Divine Pymander is revealed the Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, as pictured by this tarot card of a magician with one hand up and the other hand down.
As above, so below. And what that means is that in esoteric thought, in everything that is above is reflected down below. And that everything that is down here has a supernal, macrocosmic, if you will, origin. And that's one of the essential concepts in the occult.
As above, so below is repeatedly symbolized in esoteric art and a variety of symbols, the most basic of which is a triangle pointing upward or above. This is accompanied by a second triangle pointing downward below. When combined, they form a hexagram, commonly recognized as the Star of David, one of the most dominant symbols in the occult. Removing the base of the triangles, one can see the outline for the square and compass of Freemasonry. This next image shows what Manly Hall called the God of Reflections. He is called the Ancient One, perched over a pool of water that reflects his image. Notice also how the placement of his arms and the crown upon his head form two triangles like a Star of David, while on his chest is a Maltese cross, positioned upward and then reflected again down below. Esoterics believe this same principle of reflection can be found in nature, with bodies of water providing a mirror as a picture of the Hermetic maxim. With this in mind, consider the placement of the reflecting pools in our nation's capital. Before the Washington Monument, the U.S. Capitol, the Lincoln Memorial, and the Supreme Court.
From the symbolic compass and square, with its Egyptian all-seeing eye and as above, so below references, and the royal arch adorned with astrological symbolism, can we conclude that the Illuminati and their so-called great work is to mimic their ancient Egyptian masters?
As above, so below. All those individuals that were involved in any type of architecture to the ancients, that philosophy, that dictum, especially in Freemasonry, was as above, so below. What you have in the heavens should reflect, at a certain period of time, that which is on the earth.
Federal Triangle was basically reflected from the stars.
Washington, D.C. was built according to Hermetic principles, as above, so below.
It was laid out to reflect what was going on in the stars, where you had a right-angled triangle surrounding the constellation of Virgo.
The right-angled triangle surrounding Virgo is partly reflected in the layout of Federal Triangle. The White House, Washington Monument, and Capitol Building were designed in a right triangle, according to a star pattern above, where three stars surround the constellation Virgo, forming a stellar triangle.
With this in mind, consider the following. On September the 11th, 2001, during the incident involving the Twin Towers, there was, above, an important astrological alignment between two of the most astrologically powerful celestial bodies, Saturn and Pluto. They formed an important aspect to each other, a highly destructive one, an opposition. Let us begin by looking at the planet Saturn. Saturn, and its astrological symbolism, is that of the planet of form and structure. It is also known as the planet of materialistic power. Saturn, on 9/11, was in the sign of Gemini, the twins. Gemini also represents multiplicity. Now let us consider Pluto. Pluto represents destruction and transformation. Pluto on 9/11 was in the sign of Sagittarius, the sign of religion, the sign of foreign cultures and long-distance travel. Is the planet of structure in the sign of the twins enough to give us an as above, so below reflection? Is Pluto in the sign of religion enough to give us the as above, so below reflection on 9/11? Are the Illuminati, with their worship of astrology, their obsession, their fixation with all things Egyptian, still performing occult ritualistic sacrifices of as above, so below connotations? Saturn, the planet of structure and materialistic power, in the sign of the twins and multiplicity, gave us an interesting below reflection, the twinned world trade structural center of materialistic power, complete with multiple floors. Pluto, the planet of transformation through destruction, in the sign of Sagittarius, foreign cultures and religion, brought to our attention another key, interesting below reflection, the role played by the fundamentalist Islamic hijackers that allegedly destroyed the World Trade Center.
As above, so below. What is the creed? To know, to dare, to will, and to keep silence. What is the way? Know thyself. What is the secret of the way? In your temple you are one with the gods. Atah, Gibor, Leolam, Adonai. The temple is open. God praise me. What is our will this night? To summon the spirit Visago. Will we succeed?
We will.
Why will we succeed?
Because we will it.
In his book, The Secret Destiny of America, Manly P. Hall wrote that world democracy was the secret dream of the great classical philosophers, saying that the brilliant plan of the ancients has survived to our time, and it will continue to function until the great work is accomplished. Many researchers believe this great work is the secret behind the wars and rumors of war America has been involved in through the 20th century, right up to the present day. Could this plan of the ancients to establish a world democracy be the real hidden agenda of secret societies? And was this ancient plan echoed in the 2005 inaugural address given by President Bush?
When our founders declared a new order of the ages, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled.
The occult is working at the highest levels of our society, using the military and financial power of the United States to bring about this one world state. And the President has spoken openly about it, how the purpose of the United States is to bring democracy to the nations of the world. Where did this become the function of our nation, to bring democracy to the world? You only need to read the writings of Manly P. Hall, where he tells you that for 3,000 years, secret societies have been working to bring democracy to the world. You read President Bush's speech, before the Association on Democracy, the National Association of Democracy. He tells you for 2,500 years, people have been working to bring democracy to the world.
Yet the ancient philosophers recognized that a true democracy could only be achieved by a society of perfected men.
The perfected men would be comfortable in a true democracy. And probably a true democracy cannot emerge until there is enough of such human beings in the world that can take over the government of man. It will be that kind of leadership. It'll be like Plato's vision of the philosopher king, the man who has wisdom and the man who has power. Democracy has the occult promise of a fair world to live in.
Now, you mentioned the occult promise. How would you define a term like that for an audience who's...
Well, probably define that term by saying that promise is
explain the word occult.
Well, it's obscure. It's hidden, not visible to the normal eye. So an occult promise is something that is inherent, but only visible to those who have that inner vision. So a fair world is a kind of occult promise at the heart of democracy.
But is this occult promise part of America's Christian heritage? And if not, could this account for why the many symbols that adorn America's capital city come not from the Bible, but from the ancient mystery religion?
And if America were really, truly a Christian nation, what would all of these mythological characters be in our city? Certainly the Christian influence was very strong. From the Christian point of view, we were formed as a Christian nation. But from the occultist point of view, and those associated with astrology and the ancient mystery religions, America was, of course, and Washington, D.C. was to represent their position. So you've had the two forces, in America ever since its formation.
While it seems that most of America's leaders have upheld Christian ideals, their reason for doing so is often questioned. If they were Christians, why would they erect monuments to pagan gods and goddesses? And if they were pagans, why confess to Christian ideals? Manly Hall suggests the reason may have been one of self-preservation. He argues that because of the persecutions of organized religion in the Old World, the secret societies employed even greater methods of secrecy to protect their occult philosophies, making themselves sound as though their beliefs had to do with Christianity, which was the dominant belief in Europe, and eventually America. He says the pagan intellectuals reclothed their original ideas in a garment of Christian phraseology, but bestowed the keys of the symbolism only upon those duly initiated and bound to secrecy. It is for this reason that all secret societies have an initiation process whereby members are bound by blood oaths not to reveal the secrets of the order. A chief factor that contributes to confusion about the beliefs of America's founders is the presence of Rosicrucianism. The Rosicrucians are a mystical, arcane society that played a major role in the development of Freemasonry. The rose and cross, which symbolize the society, are also the source of its confusion. The rose is the symbol of secrecy and represents the pagan mystery religions, while the cross symbolizes Christianity. Rosicrucianism is when the two are combined. Because of this, one can begin to understand how a man like Charles Thomson could be famous for his English translation of the Old and New Testaments, and at the same time approve the design of the Great Seal for the United States with the all-seeing eye of Horus floating over an Egyptian pyramid. Thomson was closely associated with a man named Peter Miller, a well-known 18th century Rosicrucian and the leader of the Ephrata community in Ephrata, Pennsylvania. The Ephrata cloister is believed to have been the first esoteric settlement in the New World, with connections to some of the founding fathers, such as Benjamin Franklin and George Washington. The early Ephrata movement clearly held mystical beliefs, even driving stakes into doorways to ward off evil spirits.
We now know for certain that they were Rosicrucians. It was Washington was close to these individuals, as well as Franklin and Washington and Jefferson.
Benjamin Franklin even enlisted the aid of Peter Miller to translate the Declaration of Independence into a number of European languages and to inform the world of America's independence. The printing for these translations was done at the Ephrata cloister. Peter Miller would have been further connected to many of the founding fathers through the American Philosophical Society, founded originally by Benjamin Franklin in 1743. The Society's members included such prominent figures as Thomas Paine, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, the Marquis de Lafayette, George Washington, Charles Thomson, and of course, Peter Miller. Later members would also include such names as Charles Darwin and Thomas Edison. Franklin Society is thought to be directly related to the earlier concepts set forth by Sir Francis Bacon. According to Michael Howard in his book, The Occult Conspiracy, Franklin's American Philosophical Society was operated in the same tradition as the Royal Society in England, which was based on Sir Francis Bacon's Rosicrucian concept of the Invisible College.
In the history of the Royal Society, they refer to the beginnings of the Royal Society came from a group of people who called themselves the Invisible College.
The purpose of the Royal Society of London was to further Bacon's advancement of learning through scientific investigation. It is without question, however, that some of their work led to the metaphysical and the occult.
And then we find that the Rosicrucians called themselves the Invisible Brotherhood, and the College of Rosicrucians was therefore, or was called by them, the Invisible College.
A Rosicrucian influence can be clearly seen in some of America's symbols. For example, this image of a pelican feeding her young appears in Manly Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages and is very common to Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry. Now notice the Great Seal for the state of Louisiana. This particular replica is found inside the inner corridors of the U.S. Capitol. The Temple Church in London is a well-known Knight Templar church. Here we can see that the Golden Rosy Cross can be traced back to the mysterious knights. Now, notice the art surrounding the shrine. how a series of squares are shown with red and golden roses in the midst. The shrine opposite has a variation of the same design. Now consider this same pattern as it appears throughout the interior of the state capitol. Inside the old Supreme Court room, and in various forms throughout the Library of Congress. Sir Francis Bacon became the chief of the Rosicrucians in England. His famous saying, "Knowledge is power," is found written inside the Library of Congress, while a statue of Bacon can be seen on the upper level. Elsewhere in the main library is a Baconian passage from his collection of essays. It reads, "The inquiry, knowledge, and belief of truth is the sovereign good of human nature." This saying is found over a statue representing philosophy. Could this be an indication that Baconian philosophy governs the New World concept? Bacon took his inspiration from the goddess Pallas Athena, known for her helmet of invisibility. Pallas Athena images also turn up throughout Washington, D.C. The Virginia State Seal bears the image of Athena with her foot upon a fallen king whose crown is cast aside. The word Sic Semper Tyrannis, thus always to tyrants, written beneath. To the Romans, Athena was called Minerva. This painting of Minerva can be found in the Great Hall of the Library of Congress. At 15.5 feet high, it is the most imposing image in the room. Notice she holds a spear that comes like a ray of light from the sun, with a traditional helmet of Athena at her feet. This particular work was done by 19th century artist Elihu Vedder. Vedder was known as a symbolist painter whose style was part of a movement that can be traced to France during the 19th century and an art house called the Salon de la Rose Croix. Yes, they were a group of Rosicrucian artists known for promoting symbolic and often bizarre imagery, some of which, like the image of this satyr, seems to be repeated inside the Library of Congress. It's not clear if Vedder himself was a Rosicrucian, but one of his chief influences certainly was. William Butler Yeats was a prominent member of the Golden Dawn, a Rosicrucian secret society. Yeats, along with Irish mystic William Blake, are said to be two of Vedder's leading inspirations. Vedder's own occult themes are filled with haunting, esoteric imagery, like this work, which is called The Cup of Death. In addition to Minerva, Vedder was commissioned to do a series of paintings illustrating government, which can be found at the east end of the Great Hall in the Library of Congress. Now let's look again at this image from the Salon de la Rose Croix. It pictures Leonardo da Vinci on the right, dressed like Joseph of Arimathea, whom occultists believe was the original cupbearer for the Holy Grail. Beside him is Dante Alighieri, dressed as a Knight Templar. By now, most people are familiar with Da Vinci's arcane background thanks to Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. Most are also familiar with Dante's Inferno, representing the many circles of hell. But according to Michael Howard, Dante was no ordinary writer. He was in fact a Rosicrucian Grand Master who wove Rosicrucian philosophies into his writings. Masonic philosopher Albert Pike wrote that it was Dante who first publicly expounded the symbol of the Rose Cross, something partly seen in William Blake's sketch of Dante's Paradise, with a cross in the center. But now look at this drawing done by famed artist Gustave Doré. The title of Doré's illustration is, quote, "The saintly throng in the form of a rose." But one final Rosicrucian emblem in the Library of Congress is worth noting. High up in the ceiling, in between two faunish-looking figures with serpents for legs, is what appears to be a traditional crucifixion. But behind the Christ-like figure on the cross is a black, double-headed phoenix. The words in Latin that encircle the image come from Psalm 17:8, a psalm that is often employed in Rosicrucian writings. It reads, "Under the shadow of thy wings, protect us." The question is, whose wings are providing the protection?
Beginning in the 1980s, a belief has slowly taken over the world. That neoliberal globalization, with its built-in self-regulating mechanisms, would finally do away with old institutions like the state and the military, and would usher the planet into an era of relative peace and prosperity.
Free trade will bring on a Great Depression.
9/11 and the current economic crisis have shown that belief to be largely a myth. Many signs were already there. Markets have always relied on state power and military might. America's transformation from republic to economic superpower following World War II was accompanied by the creation of a global network of military bases, unlike any other in history. According to the Pentagon's Base Structure Report, today these amount to 716 in 38 countries. More than 250,000 soldiers are stationed on these bases. In addition to this, the US has a military presence in 110 countries around the world. A year after his election, Barack Obama approved the new administration's first military budget. This amounts to $680 billion, $30 billion more than Bush's last defense budget, and almost equaling the $787 billion set aside by the new administration for the economic crisis stimulus package. Why, despite the crisis, does the military budget keep growing? Are crises and military expansion related in some way?
When we have different presentations, or sometimes bands that come, or even when we have talent night, if we have people that want to show off their talent, we have a stage. We've done all sorts of things here, from a Halloween party, there's Christmas parties, there's other events that happen here at this center as well. Yeah, they have salsa classes, so I've never taken a salsa class.
In the early 21st century, military bases, the network of military bases all around the world, forms the new empire that the United States is trying to build. When you look at the Pentagon's website and their public information, they acknowledge having somewhere over 700 military bases scattered among about 130 countries. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. Most Americans have no idea. There are more than 250,000, more than 250,000 U.S. troops stationed on these bases all around the world.
It's not illegal to tape, but I got to respect the manager's point of view. Those are the movies that we have, and the movies are free.
Bringing in the morning catch in a quiet resort on Ecuador's Pacific coast, a scene common in any Latin American port town. But above the fishermen's heads, look closer. A U.S. military spy plane is on a mission to catch cocaine-loaded speedboats on this drug trade route. Launched from Manta, the only U.S. military base in South America, U.S. Commander Robert Leonard says counter-narcotics is the only mission for the aircraft.
Potentially fishing boats that are moving illicit cargo, or the new threat, which is the semi-submersible. And they are assets that are on the surface of the ocean. That radar is looking on the surface of the ocean. It can't penetrate the jungle.
But these operations are now shrouded in controversy. the attack by Colombian forces on a rebel camp in Ecuador has raised questions of whether these spy planes provided information for the attack, something the U.S. commander here denies.
Here at Full Monte, that has nothing to do with our mission, and we had nothing to do with what happened then. In fact, during that particular date, the AWACS, which you see here behind us, were actually sitting here on the ramp. They weren't even flying on those days.
The attack on the Colombian guerrilla camp provoked a regional crisis. Ecuador and Colombia broke diplomatic relations. Senior Ecuadorian officials resigned from their posts, and the American military operations are now in question.
The surveillance these planes do are now a subject of investigation at the heart of the National Assembly in Ecuador.
In addition to the investigation, Ecuador's lawmakers are proposing to ban all foreign military presence in the country. It's a direct swipe against the U.S. from a socialist government determined that the U.S. base should not be allowed to stay.
I think it affects our national sovereignty. It's evident that the conduction of the operations are totally in the hands of the Americans. I would doubt that the United States would accept a Mexican or Canadian base in its territory.
Failed attempt to overthrow Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa has ignited new claims that the U.S. is still in the business of putting in and taking out Latin American presidents. From Venezuela to Haiti to Honduras, coups involving the United States might not seem like anything new to some people, but could the emergence of leftist governments actually challenge the dominance the U.S. has enjoyed in Latin America? Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa has returned home after that failed coup. Thousands of police took to the streets of Quito yesterday, fired up about a new law that they believed would jeopardize their benefits. Hundreds of military troops came to the rescue of President Correa in a standoff with police that lasted an hour. Several were injured and 2 died, but as the chaos and turmoil unfolded, the mainstream media barely touched the story. Tom Murphy is a blogger for the Huffington Post. He joins me now from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to talk more about this. So, Tom, this incident has dramatically affected not just Ecuador, but the entire continent of South America, really. A group of South American presidents had an emergency meeting in Argentina and pledged their military support to President Correa. And all the State Department in Washington has said is that they're, quote-unquote, monitoring the situation closely. What's your take? Why is the media and the United States at least outwardly ignoring this?
For the past 50 years, Japan has relied on the U.S. military to maintain regional security. But growing protests over the American base on the island of Okinawa has tested this alliance. Now Prime Minister Yukio Hatoyama's leadership is in question after reneging on a promise to remove the base.
I wonder if you would address the withdrawal of the American military bases in Saudi Arabia, what the real story was there. It seems to me that when Osama bin Laden listed his demands, his number one demand was the departure of American bases from his homeland. Yes. I think Israel was number 4 or something of his demands. And very soon after 9/11, the American bases left.
Yes, very good point. It goes back to the geography. I mean, all the Americans were up here in the east, but because of the way Saudi Arabia was pulled together, it was possible for Osama bin Laden to say they are in the Holy Land. Sort of talk, I mean, obviously troublemaking, as if they were in Mecca and Medina. The Americans and the Saudis were very careful to keep on that side. This
of Defense Robert Gates from the United States is visiting Latin America this week and actually sealed a deal on Monday with Brazil to extend further and I guess you could say to consolidate the military cooperation between both Brazil and the United States. So even though there has been no declaration or statement made officially by the Venezuelan government, there certainly is concern in the region, there's concern amongst the people of Venezuela and other nations in the region that this is yet another example of the U.S. disproportionately expanding their military presence in Latin America, as happened last year with Colombia, with the establishment of an agreement with the Colombian government between Washington and Colombia that will permit basically a territorial usage of Colombia in addition to 7 military bases for U.S. military purposes. And in fact, official documents from the U.S. Air Force talked about that agreement as necessary in order for the United States to execute full-spectrum military operations in South America and to combat what the United States considers a constant threat from so-called anti-U.S. governments.